Good evening. My name is Paula Needham and I am a JCT Geography Advisor, and I'm joined this evening by my colleague Jimmy Condon.
Good evening, everyone. We're also joined by our team leader, Ada Broderick, and together we will answer your questions over the next hour. However, if we don't get an opportunity to answer all your questions, please email us on info@jct.ie, which is the email address here on the screen. There are PDF documents on the right-hand side of the screen, which you can download during the webinar. They are, number one, an infographic on the curriculum specification for Junior Cycle Geography. Number two, the Junior Cycle Geography Learning Outcomes poster. Number three, a unit of learning focusing on urban change and secondary economic activity. Number four, the Junior Cycle Geography Wellbeing poster. And number five, the Junior Cycle Geography specification. We will be referring to these documents throughout the webinar. These documents are also available to download from the Geography section of the JCT website.
We will take a moment to consider our learning intentions for this evening. Our learning intentions for the webinar are: familiarise ourselves with the specification for Junior Cycle Geography, deepen our understanding of how to plan and create a unit of learning that can be used to teach Junior Cycle Geography, consider learning, teaching and assessment, exploring the language of learning in the geography classroom. Consider the use of digital technologies in the Junior Cycle Geography classroom that can be used towards embedding digital technologies in learning, teaching and assessment. The Junior Cycle allows students to make a greater connection with learning, focusing on the quality of learning that takes place, often experiences that are engaging, enjoyable and relevant to their lives. It is important to recognise that a key change is that they are learning outcomes based. Our first learning intention of the evening is to familiarise ourselves with the specification for Junior Cycle Geography. Let's take a moment to refresh our minds on the place of geography within the Junior Cycle framework. The 8 principles are the foundation of the Junior Cycle. There are 24 statements of learning. Geography provides students with the opportunity to experience 7 of the 24 statements of learning. There are 8 key skills, which are embedded in the learning outcomes of the Junior Cycle Geography specification. Students are given the opportunity to enhance their competencies in these key skills through the study of geography. Well-being is one of the underpinning principles and is part of all aspects of the Junior Cycle, including our subject geography. The National Council for Curriculum and Assessment, NCCA, have identified a series of indicators which are central to well-being. They are connected, aware, resilient, respected, active and responsible. Junior Cycle Geography will require a minimum of 200 hours timetable student engagement over the 3 years and is offered at common level. You may find it helpful to have access to the Junior Cycle Geography specification during the webinar. The assessment guidelines should be used in conjunction with the curriculum specification for Junior Cycle Geography. All documentation can be accessed on curriculumonline.ie. I'm going to pass you over to Jimmy now to take you through the overall structure of Junior Cycle Geography.
Thanks, Paula. The Junior Cycle Geography specification focuses on developing students' knowledge, understanding, skills and values. The specification sets out 3 interconnected strands that contain 28 learning outcomes. The specification emphasises a non-linear integrated approach by combining learning outcomes across the strands to develop learning experiences for all our students. The 3 elements inform how students will experience the learning outcomes within the strands. Within the geography specification, the elements give teachers the autonomy to choose the most appropriate elements to use when engaging with learning outcomes. The elements are processes, patterns, systems and scale, geographical skills and sustainability. The specification is informed by the overarching concept of geoliteracy. This refers to the student's ability to develop far-reaching decisions through geographical thinking and reasoning. The core components of geoliteracy are the 3 I's: interactions, interconnections, and implications. In first year, students engage with the learning outcomes and their learning is supported by ongoing assessment and formative feedback. This continues in second year and includes a classroom-based assessment which gives students the opportunity to undertake a structured inquiry through a response to a recent geographical event or events. It will take place over a 3-week period and is called Geography in the News. In third year, students continue to engage with the learning outcomes, and their learning is supported by formative feedback and ongoing assessment. Students complete a classroom-based assessment over a 3-week period called My Geography, which is a structured inquiry into a geographical aspect or aspects of a local area. Following this, they will complete an assessment task, which is marked by the State Examinations Commission. It is worth 10% of their final grade. In June of third year, students will complete a final examination worth 90% at common level of no more than 2-hour duration. The final exam is set and marked by the SEC. The descriptors for the classroom-based assessments and the grade descriptors for the final examination will be added to the junior cycle profile of achievement, as you can see here on the screen. The following resource has been created by the JCT Geography team to assist in your planning and will be available on the Geography section of the JCT website in the coming weeks. We have had great interaction so far this evening, and we would like to thank you for that. We're going to focus on 2 questions that we've received at this point, and we'll address more questions later on in the webinar. To do that, I'm going to pass you on to Paula, who's going to take you through these questions.
Thank you, Jimmy. The first question we're going to look at this evening is, how do I figure out what a student needs to be able to do with each learning outcome? First, the learning outcome needs to be unpacked in order to decide on the depth of learning that needs to occur. Defining the action verb, which appears at the beginning of all learning outcomes, is a very important part of this process. Another important consideration is the age of the student and the stage that they're at in their learning. Finally, an understanding where the learning outcome fits into the bigger picture of the junior cycle geography will inform us of students' prior knowledge and of links to other topics that may be covered in other lessons. Another question we have received is, well, how will I know when I have a learning outcome completed? The geography specification states that the learning outcomes are for 3 years, and therefore a learning outcome focused on a point in time will not be completed, but will continue to support students' learning of geography up to the end of junior cycle. In other words, we will continue to dip in and out of the 28 learning outcomes throughout the 3 years of junior cycle geography. Thank you for all your questions, and remember you can continue to ask questions throughout the webinar. Our next learning intention for this evening is to deepen our understanding of how to plan and create a unit of learning. There are many approaches to planning. Planning is a process. We have professional time to assist us in our planning. We are now going to show you a video where Laura Sweeney, a JCT associate, will outline how her geography department in the Dominican College, Griffith Avenue, Dublin, started the process of planning a unit of learning.
Planning is a process. As a department, before we started planning our units of learning, we considered all of the learning outcomes across the 3 strands. Then we identified what learning we wanted our students to experience. Following on from our cluster day in March, we used some of the components suggested to us in order to plan a unit of learning. The first step was to give our unit a name, and as a department we endeavoured to give each of our units a creative name as a way of gaining students' interest. Sometimes for some of the units we actually felt it was easier to leave the naming until the end of the process. Next, we identified the main learning outcomes, and these will be the focus of the unit of learning. Other learning outcomes will be mentioned, but as a department they will be covered in future units. Then we considered the action verb as detailed in the learning outcome, and this would help us classify what we expected students to be able to do at the end of each unit of learning. Next, we considered the elements as the lens through which the students experience the learning outcomes. Depending on the unit, we could use 1, 2, or all 3 of the elements. Finally, geoliteracy is threaded throughout each unit of learning so that students consider the 3 I's of what they are learning.
A very important point to consider when planning a unit of learning is what our students should know or be able to do by the end of that unit. In our classrooms, we will create opportunity for students to learn what we have collaboratively agreed on as a subject department. Sharing learning intentions with our students helps the students to be clear about what learning is taking place. Sharing success criteria provide us with a greater opportunity to give more focused formative feedback with a view to progressing the students' learning. In order to be sure that the learning is taking place, it is important to discuss different ways that we can check in on our students' learning as a subject department. In our individual classrooms, the use of formative assessment combined with formative feedback will allow us to monitor student progress throughout a unit of learning. If you have a student studying a Level 2 learning programme, it would be important to consider them when planning units of learning and to get in touch with the SEND team in your school. Another thing to note is that all plans should be living documents that are adjusted year to year. Reflection both at an individual teacher level and at a subject department level should occur on what worked well and what didn't. If something doesn't work, it should be adjusted for the following year. Before we get to the stage of linking learning outcomes, it is useful for us as teachers to unpack the learning outcome. Unpacking learning outcomes is a term used to describe the process of considering what is possible in teaching, learning, and assessment within the learning outcome. This involves considering what knowledge, understanding, skills, and values are expected to be developed by the student. First, we need to look at the learning outcome and think about the strand that it is in and the wording in the learning outcome. From there, we break it down to what things do we want the students to know or be able to do. From here, we moved on and thought about what way we would teach this in the classroom. This is where we consider the three elements and how we as teachers will create an experience for the students to learn about the learning outcome. One element can be used on its own, or we can use a combination of two or three. This would also involve thinking about the resources required. Another part to consider is what opportunities are there to develop geoliteracy within the learning outcome. What you can see here is the JCT Geography Action Verb poster available on the Geography Resources section of the JCT website. It contains the specifications definition of each of the action verbs that are used in relation to the 28 geography learning outcomes.
On this slide, you can see the JCT Geography Learning Outcomes poster. It can be also downloaded from the Geography Resources section of the JCT website. In the poster, you have all 28 learning outcomes split into the three strands. When unpacking learning outcomes, you may like to consider a thematic approach to planning. In order to take a non-linear approach, you will need to consider learning outcomes from other strands that will complement each other in the development of a unit of learning. When planning the unit of learning for this webinar, we linked 4 learning outcomes, and we decided that we were going to focus on Learning Outcome 3.4, consider the factors affecting the location and origin of rural and urban settlement in Ireland. Learning Outcome 3.5, examine the causes and effects of urban change in an Irish town. Learning Outcome 2.5, describe a local secondary activity in relation to its function and the factors that influence its location. And finally, Learning Outcome 2.9, assessing the interrelationships between the physical world, tourism, and transport. This flexibility gives the teacher autonomy to decide on what learning is most appropriate given the age, stage, and context of the students in their classroom. Linking back to the vision for the junior cycle, placing the student at the centre. I will now pass you back to Paula to take you through the process of unpacking a learning outcome.
The process of unpacking a learning outcome, for example 3.4, is useful for our own professional understanding of the specification. In order to plan what will be taught in the classroom, we need to link learning outcomes across the strands where possible and practical in order to create units of learning. The specification is driven by units of learning. It would be at this stage that you would consider which learning outcomes have the strongest links, considering the local geography of your school to 3.4, and then plan a unit of learning. We selected learning outcomes 2.5, 2.9, and 3.5. You can also see other potential links, for example, from strand 1, learning outcome 1.4 assesses soil type in a local area in relation to composition and vegetation. Students will study soil in their local area in relation to its composition and vegetation. The physical landscape has a huge influence on what our land is used for. Students will realise the effects the physical landscape has on primary economic activities, which has a potential link to learning outcome 2.3 from strand 2, which is to identify how the physical landscape influences the development of primary activities, linking it back to learning outcome 3.4 by describing how the physical landscape influences the origin of settlement. These are just a few links we thought of. There are many more, and you might link them in different ways to how we did. What you see on your screen are 4 learning outcomes. You can see the integration of strand 2, exploring how we interact with the physical world, and strand 3, exploring people, place, and change. Throughout this webinar, we will focus on 3 learning outcomes in the blue boxes. There is an opportunity to link learning outcome 2.9. This is an option which could be taken by teachers dependent on your local context and the time you want to spend on this unit of learning. When planning this unit of learning, our local area is County Waterford, and we are focusing on Dungarvan as a local urban area. We can identify the elements in this unit of learning. The elements inform how students will experience the learning outcomes within the strands. The students will approach these learning outcomes through the lens of these elements, as you can see on the screen. It is important to remember to consider geoliteracy when planning and highlight it when it is developed in the classroom to help our students on their journey to becoming geoliterate. Many of the participants in the webinar have contacted us asking the following question: how much time do you spend on a unit of learning? The answer to this question depends on several factors. They include the student's ability, their age, and the stage they are at in their learning journey. It would also depend on the number of learning outcomes in that unit of learning and the depth of coverage that will be given to each learning outcome during that unit. No specified time is given in the Junior Cycle Geography specification, but it is important to remember that these learning outcomes are for 3 years.
Another question that has come up tonight and came up regularly during our CPD days in 2017 and 2018 was, where do we start with the planning process? To answer that, let's focus on unpacking learning outcome 3.4 in more detail. Consider is the action verb used. The specification defines consider as describe patterns in data, use knowledge and understanding to interpret patterns, make predictions, and check reliability. On the screen, you can see a screen grab from the action verbs poster. We can clearly see what students will be able to do having unpacked learning outcome 3.4 when planning. This information will help inform the learning intentions in class. When learning is made explicit, student learning improves. Take a moment to read the information on the blue box. On the screen now, you can see the learning outcome we decided to work with, learning outcome 3.4. As a group, we read and thought about the wording of the learning outcome and then unpacked it using the process Paula mentioned a few moments ago. Since this learning outcome focuses on settlement in Ireland, we placed ourselves in a school in Dungarvan, County Waterford. This allowed us to discuss things that would relate to that particular area. Having completed our planning, we named the unit from Garvan's Fort to Dungarvan. The idea here was to show change in settlement over time through the title of the unit. Our first task when planning this unit of learning was to discuss what prior knowledge the students would have. We agreed that students would have previously looked at rural settlement in the area. We then focused on the main learning outcomes that would appear in this unit of learning. The process of deciding on these was discussed earlier in this webinar. We agreed that parts of learning outcomes 3.4, 3.5, 2.5 and 2.9 would be introduced or developed during this unit of learning. As mentioned earlier, it is important to keep the action verb in mind when unpacking a learning outcome. In our plan, we chose to list the action verbs. We would then use the action verb poster created by the JCT Geography team to define each one as we engage with it. These definitions are also available in the appendix of the geography specification. In the bullet points on screen now, you will be able to read through some of the things we would expect our students to know and or be able to do in order to have engaged with the learning outcomes in this unit of learning. The full unit of learning plan is available to download from the document section of this webinar. These were decided upon by each member of our team as we discussed what we felt would be needed. Take some time now to read through them. Each teacher will have autonomy in how they will teach. The bullet points here are suggestions, and teachers can develop these into their own learning intentions, depending on the needs of their students. In these blue boxes with the white text on screen now, we have broken down the elements and considered how each might be used as a tool to teach the students about the learning outcomes in this unit of learning. In processes, patterns, systems, and scale, we focus on ways in which systems interact and some of the processes that operate, focusing on the GSK factory in Dungarvan. With geographical skills, we create opportunities for students to engage with the content of the unit through using a variety of maps, photographs, and statistics. While in sustainability, we connect past and present developments with the future and raise questions about how this may have an effect on future generations. As part of the planning process, we also discussed geoliteracy and the opportunities it presents in this unit of learning. In our plan, we have listed an example of each of the 3 I's and where we think opportunities will arise to develop each of them. With interactions, students will understand that the growth of Dungarvan leads to greater interaction with other urban centres. Through interconnections, students will understand that employment generated by GSK Dungarvan directly and indirectly leads to the growth of the town. Exploring the area of implications will allow students to understand that increased employment and urban growth has implications for the development of services, infrastructure, and communication links in Dungarvan. Checking in on the learning is an important step in moving learning forward. Formative assessment is a very important way in which this can be done. It allows us to provide students with formative feedback, and some examples, such as creating success criteria, can be included in our unit of learning plan. Summative assessment complements the work done through formative assessment, and here examples such as project work or end of unit tests are noted in our plan. Take a little time now to read some of the ways in which we can check in on our students' learning. Department resources are also included in our plan in order to ensure we share resources as a department. The space for individual notes is there to allow each teacher write their own thoughts when planning lessons. Finally, space is provided for reflection. If done both individually and collaboratively as a department, our unit of learning plans will continue to evolve and improve over time. What you can see on the screen now is what a full unit of learning plan may look like when created collaboratively by a geography department. And as mentioned earlier, it is available to download during this webinar. On the screen now, you can see some of the areas that we focused on in our unit of learning plan on Dungarvan. Take a moment to reflect and consider the terms that appear on the slide and how these compare to what you and your subject departments have collaboratively planned. We are now going to move into our next learning intention of the evening, which is to consider learning, teaching, and assessment, exploring the language of learning in the geography classroom. How can we help improve both the learning experience of and the learning outcomes for all students? The Looking at Our School 2016 Quality Framework from the Department of Education and Skills Inspectorate examines ways to improve the learning experiences of all students, exploring methods in both individual and collective practices. In Domain 4, Teachers' Collective Collaborative Practice, we are encouraged to work collaboratively and collectively in planning our units of learning. Let us now focus on the following question. What is a learning intention? A learning intention for a lesson or series of lessons is a statement created by the teacher that describes clearly what the teacher wants the students to know, understand, and be able to do as a result of ongoing learning and assessment. On the screen, you can see learning intentions that have been created following the unpacking of learning outcome 3.4. Consider the factors that affect the location and origin of rural and urban settlement in Ireland. These learning intentions are then shared with students in the geography classroom. Take a moment to read the learning intentions that have been connected to learning outcome 3.4. Clear learning intentions help students to focus on what they are learning and what they should be able to do. They are written in language that all students will understand. They help to achieve the learning outcomes from the specification. Learning intentions can be linked to one or more learning outcomes in the specification. When introducing the factors that affect settlement with students, it may be a good idea to check in on where the student's level of knowledge is in this area. In this activity, students are asked, using a sketch map drawn by the teacher, to imagine that they are a member of a group of early settlers in this part of Ireland 8,000 years ago. One way of doing this would be to use group work activity, which stimulates discussion, collaboration, and critical thinking. The students' challenge is to work as part of a group to decide on a suitable location for a settlement site. The activity has been differentiated by offering the option of using the number of the square or a grid reference. These instructions also act as success criteria by helping to guide the students as to what they're being asked to do. The students are then given time in groups to work together to come up with a suitable site backed up by reasons for their choice. Having had the opportunity to discuss suitable site locations and share their ideas, students are then given oral formative feedback from the teacher to help them develop their ideas further. The key factors that affect the location of settlements are clearly labelled on the sketch map. They include flat, dry land, water supply from the river, close to the coast, a sheltered location due to the presence of higher ground to the north, and aspect. The purpose of this is to help students in their groups to challenge the decision of the site that they have made and to check if they have made the best possible choice. This feedback given to the students should help them to make more informed judgments in their group. Hence, it is referred to as formative feedback. Students are then given more time to either stick with or change their choice of site. At this point, the teacher will discuss the possible sites that the students have selected, focusing on the positives and negatives of each. It is also an opportunity for the teacher to either introduce or develop the geographical skill of using grid references. One possible site is at grid reference X1021, or box number 5. The grid square is then located by the teacher using the letter, easting, nording, or LEN strategy. This can be done by using animations on a PowerPoint slide to show the students the letter, easting, and nording appear on the screen as has been done here. This may be particularly helpful for visual learners when working on the skill of grid references. The advantages that the site offers are then outlined. These include flat land and sheltered location, among others. Sharing these with the students helps to reinforce the success criteria relating to the factors that influence settlement. Other possible locations are also highlighted using grid references, and the positives and negatives of each of these can now be examined with the students using the success criteria. Through this activity, students are being given an opportunity to contribute to the learning that is happening in class. This gives them a voice and therefore makes them feel more involved in the process. Giving students this opportunity is referred to as student voice. The next step in this activity is to apply the knowledge to the students' local area of Dungarvan. The students are shown the same sketch map that they had been working on, but it is now overlaid by a map of their local town, Dungarvan. They can now compare the choice that they had made about a possible site for settlement on the sketch map and the actual site that Dungarvan has developed on over the years. Students are now encouraged to re-examine the reasons why Dungarvan located at its current site. At this stage, the key factors that determine the selection of a settlement site are examined further using the element of geographical skills. Students are shown what each of the key factors may look like on either maps or photographs of Dungarvan. First, a 19th century map of Dungarvan is used to show that the river and proximity to the coast were and still are important reasons why Dungarvan is located at its present site. Secondly, another historical map is used to show that the southerly aspect and sheltered location were also important locational factors. Next, a present-day map of Dungarvan is used to show students how flat land and being a route focus have helped Dungarvan develop at its current location. Finally, a vertical aerial photograph is used to highlight the importance of bridging points in a town's development over time. The oral feedback provided to students here should help them clarify the success criteria further and reinforce the factors that influence the location of settlement. I'm going to pass you over to Paula now, and she's going to take you through some more practical examples.
Thank you, Jimmy. We all want to improve student learning and student achievement. Feedback is critical to improving learning as it both influences students' motivation to learn and their ability to do so. Homework provides an opportunity for students to individually process the work done in class. In the lesson following the homework activity, opportunities present themselves for a variety of formative feedback. Feedback includes telling students what they have done well and what they need to do to improve. It also includes reminding students of what they were aiming to achieve. An important step is reflection. Students are afforded the opportunity to reflect about their learning. As a follow-up to this homework activity on the location of Dungarvan, a variety of feedback strategies could be used. For example, plus, minus, and interesting, or 3 stars and a wish are strategies that could be used with students to help them in their learning. These are examples of written formative feedback. The Diamond 6 exercise activates students as learning resources for one another. The students work together and discuss the reasons for location in Dungarvan. They identified the top, bottom, and 4 of approximately equal rank. It is an extension or follow-up exercise that provides opportunities for students to reflect on their homework, to share the responses, and therefore to harness the power of peer tutoring. It affords an opportunity for the teacher to give formative written feedback and oral feedback as the students work in their groups. Through working in groups, the students are developing the key skills of working with others and managing information and thinking. Capturing student voice can be a powerful and effective tool to improve learning, teaching, and assessment. On the screen, you can see the learning intentions that have been shared in the geography classroom. Clear learning intentions should help students to focus on what they are learning. These are the learning intentions for Learning Outcome 3.5. Examine the causes and effects of urban change in an Irish town or city. I will pass you back to Jimmy to take you through Learning Outcome 3.5.
Great, thanks, Paula. When focusing on Learning Outcome 3.5, maps and images can be used to examine examples of and reasons for urban change in a local setting. In the case of Dungarvan, the presence of a bridge over the River Colligan has helped the town become a route focus. Subsequently, a market function developed and the town expanded as a result. The town developed around Market Square, now Grattan Square, and over time the market got busier and expanded with the town. As the town grew and developed, a railway bridge and second traffic bridge were added. The presence of 3 bridges over the River Colligan, along with the many functions provided by the town, ensured that Dungarvan continued to change over time, including through urban sprawl into the surrounding countryside. If we focus on the building of bridges in Dungarvan, we can examine urban change in the town through a series of maps and images. The original bridge was built in 1816. The railway bridge was added in 1878, while the town's second traffic bridge was built in 1987. Again, this provides an excellent opportunity to work with students on the geographical skills element. Paula will now examine how we as teachers assess whether the intended learning has been achieved.
Thank you, Jimmy. This happens through a variety of activities. Check-in points helps to bridge between learning and formative assessment. It helps to move the students' learning forward. This activity on the screen offers an opportunity for students to work with others in collaborative groups to develop far-reaching decisions through geographical thinking and reasoning. The students are exploring urban change. At this point, let us remind ourselves that the learning outcome is 3.5. Examine the causes and effects of urban change in an Irish town. The learning intention for the students is to consider the effects of urban change, in this instance, Dungarvan. All 16 cards on the screen are distributed in their groups. In their groups, the students will consider the terms and their relationships. The teacher demonstrates by showing that land quality links with agricultural land. The students will then select another red card and discuss the rationale behind selecting and linking a particular blue card with the red card. They will reason the consequences of their decision making. This is then followed by linking any green card and followed by linking the yellow cards. And again, the students have to explore their options, reflect and evaluate their selection. Take a moment to explore some of the links that can be created. Having made the links between the headings and the cards in the previous activity, the students are then encouraged to record these links in the boxes provided on the handout you can see on the screen now. To extend this activity, students are encouraged to discuss the links further by making a connection vertically, followed up by discussing and linking the terms laterally and diagonally. Through the activity, students develop cognitive, interpersonal, and interpersonal competencies. This activity can be used to consider the causes of urban change in an Irish town or city, and of course the effects of urban change in an Irish town or city. On the screen you can see an example of ongoing assessment that was carried out by students in an associate's class. The students fill the responses into the handout as shown. I will now pass you on to Jimmy, who will take us through urban change through the lens of geographical skills and sustainability.
Historical maps used in conjunction with present-day maps can be used to develop students' geographical skills and show how urban areas change over time. The town of Dungarvan has grown from an urban area of 1 kilometre squared in the mid-1800s to a size of 6 kilometres squared in the present day. Through the use of geographical questions, students are encouraged to be creative as they imagine what life may have been like in the past in Dungarvan. In addition, looking at the content through the lens of sustainability, students may imagine the areas into which Dungarvan might expand in the future. Why has Dungarvan changed in recent decades? One reason is that the area of the town has grown to meet the needs of the growing urban population. students are asked to examine the census results obtained from various sources, including www.citypopulation.de website and the CSO, and subsequently to draw a labelled line graph as shown on the screen to show the change in population growth of Dungarvan over time and to analyse data to seek patterns and relationships with the development of the town. In order to challenge students to think critically, an interesting activity to engage in would be giving students the opportunity to discuss in groups what Dungarvan may look like 30 years from now. Keywords can be co-created with students or provided by the teacher to help keep discussions focused on key points. The word cloud you can see here on the screen was created by one of our associates using Mentimeter.com, and it's an example of a digital strategy we can use in our classrooms. When working on an activity such as this, students are encouraged to view the content through the lens of sustainability, one of the 3 elements of junior cycle geography. Discussion activities like this one give an opportunity for students to have a voice in our classrooms. One way in which students could present their group findings from the previous activity is through a modified version of the social media platform Instagram. Here, students are presented with a hard copy of an Instagram screen. It is important to note that students are not using a digital device for this activity. As a group, they are asked to complete the template using the success criteria as shown on the screen to guide them. On the screen, you can see an example of this learning activity that was carried out by a student in an associate's class. Once the groups have completed the activity, they are asked to swap their work with other groups. The students in their groups are then given time to examine the work of their classmates and are offered the opportunity to give feedback using the plus, minus, and interesting or PMI strategy.
Moving on to Learning Outcome 2.5, again you can see the teacher sharing the learning intentions with his students. It is important to remember that the learning intentions are written in the language that all students will understand. We have decided to use a structured inquiry or student task to help the students to engage with this learning outcome. This process involves students asking questions, gathering data, evaluation and interpreting their findings, and presenting the information. So let us now take a look at how this process might unfold in the classroom.
Okay, Paula. Let us start by looking at ways in which students can ask questions as part of a structured inquiry. By being aware of students' interests and prior knowledge, the teacher has the ability to create tasks and assignments that are challenging and that the students will enjoy. A KWL chart is a tool that can be used to inform teaching as well as guide student learning. Students can complete the Know section of the chart to assess what their existing knowledge is. To complete the Want to Know section, students can compile a list of key geographical questions that will help them focus their research as they search for answers during the structured inquiry. The Learn section can be completed after the research process has taken place. Here, students can record the key information that they have learned, including geographical conclusions that they have made as a result of their findings. As part of the process, teachers give feedback to students and help them to progress in their learning. It helps both teachers and students to realise what has been learned. It helps students to identify their strengths and weaknesses, thus allowing them to reflect on their learning. It helps us as teachers to identify any problems that the current learning process may have. A crucial part of the structured inquiry process is gathering relevant geographical information. Developing students' research skills will help them with this process. Students can develop their research skills when looking at secondary economic activity in their local area. This can be done either inside or outside the classroom. If done outside the classroom in the form of a field investigation or study, students will get the opportunity to develop their research skills before visiting the factory in order to complement the information learned on the field investigation or study. If the inside the classroom option is chosen, students will rely on research skills to find out information about their local secondary activity. When researching independently or online, many students rely on a quick Google search or the Wikipedia website, followed by copying and pasting. There can be issues here with plagiarism, and at times a lack of knowledge on how to conduct proper research online. It is important to make it clear to students that they must acknowledge the use of other people's ideas, work, and sources. It is important for students to learn how to search for information properly, as this will become a valuable tool for them in the future. Developing this area of digital literacy means showing students the tools they can use to help them research better. These skills will also improve overall study skills and digital literacy. Webwise.ie provides a range of free secondary school teaching resources addressing a range of topics, including image sharing, social media, and more. By developing students' geographical skills, we provide them with the opportunity to research in a greater variety of ways. One such example is when students are given the opportunity to analyse and interpret a variety of maps. This allows them to research in greater detail and helps them to draw relevant geographical conclusions. In this example, students can use maps and aerial photographs in order to identify the factors that influence the location of the GSK factory in Dungarvan. When the research component of the structured inquiry is complete, it is important that students are given the opportunity to present their findings and showcase the learning that has taken place. In this example, we have asked the students to present their findings as an infographic. Students were given the option of either doing this as a digital or in paper format. Prior to the presenting of their findings, the success criteria for the infographic were discussed and shared with the students. Students could use the L component of the KWL strategy discussed earlier to help them produce the infographic. Here you can see examples of digital and non-digital infographics created by students in our associate schools. What about developing students' research skills, Paula?
Students should have an opportunity to develop their research and evaluation skills, which will help them to engage meaningfully with geography. Encouraging and providing students with opportunities to interpret and evaluate their findings is an important part of this process. In doing so, students will also become more geoliterate, as they are more aware of the world around them and the linkage between people, places, environments, and spatial patterns. In the example we have looked at this evening, students should be able to make conclusions based on the research they have done and the information that they have found. As a result, students could conclude that 10% of the town's population depend on GSK for direct employment. Future evaluation of findings reveals that a far greater percentage of the town depends on the GSK factory for indirect employment. In certain circumstances, for example, when looking at your local area, it may be possible to go a step further with your students. This could take the format of a field investigation and/or carrying out research using a range of methods. From the guidelines for the classroom-based assessment and assessment task on page 17, students are encouraged to engage in geographical investigations, including fieldwork as part of their data gathering. We have great interaction and thank you for your questions this evening. I will pass you on to Jimmy to take you through some of the questions.
Thanks, Paula. From the questions and comments we're receiving, we can see that a question coming up regularly is, what exactly is a structured inquiry? Well, we've looked at that already, but just to clarify again, the answer to that question is that a structured inquiry happens when students undertake an investigation into an aspect of geography. That investigation can happen either inside or outside the classroom and develops the students' understanding, knowledge and skills across the three strands of study: exploring the physical world, how we interact with the physical world, and exploring people, place and change. A structured inquiry process involves students asking questions, then gathering data, then evaluating and interpreting their findings, and finally presenting that information. It encourages collaboration and communication with their peers and possibly experts in other fields. More information on the Junior Cycle Geography Guidelines for the classroom-based assessments and the assessment task is available though on curriculumonline.ie and jct.ie. Other questions are coming in around the area of other areas of learning. The other areas of learning section, well, that appears on the Junior Cycle Profile of Achievement, or the JCPA. And with that section, the school has flexibility to report on the other areas of learning that a student has participated in. Students are now acknowledged and awarded for their involvement in extracurricular activities. Students can be awarded for their contributions in geography-related activities also. So things like green schools, neat streets, worldwide global schools, one good idea, and many other fantastic programs and initiatives can be commented on. For commenting in the other areas of learning, it is important to discuss how the student's participation in the activity may link to the 24 statements of learning and/or the 8 key skills. Our next learning intention is shown on the screen now. We're going to consider an example of a digital strategy that moves student learning forward in the junior cycle geography classroom. We will also summarise the key points that have been made in tonight's webinar. We all want to improve student learning and student achievement. Feedback is crucial to improving learning as it both influences students' motivation to learn and their ability to do so. Feedback includes telling students what they have done well and what they need to do to improve. It also includes reminding students of what they were aiming to achieve through the learning intentions. It is important that learning intentions and success criteria link closely with the learning outcomes contained in the junior cycle geography specification. Clear learning intentions should help students to focus not just on the task or activity taking place, but on what they are learning. They are developed by the teacher and/or the student and describe what success looks like. They help the teacher and the student to make judgments about the quality of the student's learning. Throughout the webinar, we have used numerous digital resources. Quizlet is just another example of a digital technology that can be used towards embedding digital technologies in learning, teaching and assessment in our geography classrooms. Quizlet engages our students in and out of the classroom with interactive study material, learning activities and games. It encourages students to be more connected in their learning and to be more collaborative. It can foster and nurture our love of learning new material. Using Quizlet, we created a matching activity on factors that influence settlement and urban change. We used Quizlet to develop students' geographical skills through analysing an aerial photograph of the GSK factory in Dungarvan and asking them in groups to identify some of the reasons why GSK is located in this area. The digital strategy outlines how digital technology and learning tools can be embedded in our schools in order to enhance teaching and learning. We would like to encourage your contributions during this webinar. So we're going to ask you to participate now in a short poll to answer the question that's appearing on the screen. The question is, what aspect of the new junior cycle geography specification are you most excited about? So you can see the options on your screen now. They are an opportunity to teach in a non-linear fashion, exploring the element of sustainability, exploring local geography to the learning outcomes, field investigations, and geoliteracy. Take a moment to complete the poll. Now that you've had an opportunity to answer that question, let us look at the results of the poll. The question we asked was, what aspect of the new junior cycle geography specification are you most excited about? And from the results, you can see that an opportunity to teach in a non-linear fashion is coming in along with field investigations as the top responses. People are also excited about the opportunity of using geoliteracy. Paula will now take you our return to the learning intentions for this evening, and we'll take a moment to reflect on our learning intentions.
We'll take a moment to reflect on our learning intentions for this evening. Our learning intentions for this webinar were to familiarise ourselves with the specification for junior cycle geography, deepen our understanding of how to plan and create a unit of learning that can be used to teach junior cycle geography, consider learning, teaching and assessment, exploring the language of learning in the geography classroom, consider the use of digital technologies in the junior cycle geography classroom. We'd like to remind you of some of the resources that are available on the geography section within the jct.ie website and ncca.ie. and curriculumonline.ie. The JCT Geography Twitter page is an effective way of staying up to date with our latest news, events, and links to resources. Please remember to join our mailing list, which you can find on the bottom of the JCT Geography homepage. This webinar will also be available to view again in the CPD elective workshop section on the geography section of the jct.ie. At this point, we would like to thank you for joining our webinar this evening. We look forward to meeting geography teachers during our 2018-2019 Professional Learning Experiences Days. We also want to acknowledge the great work our geography associates did with us in helping us to develop this webinar. Finally, if you have any further questions, please email us at info@jct.ie and a member of the JCT Geography team will get back to you over the course of the next couple of days. Enjoy the rest of your evening and thank you.
Thank you.